going through the Constitution line by line. We're in the Sixth Amendment now. I'm Don Frazier.
Paul Fabrizio.
And he's doing the political science and the government end of it, and I'm trying to put some historical context when I can. And
he's succeeding brilliantly.
So right now, we've taken the Sixth Amendment, broken it into 6 parts, and now we're on part 2, and this has to do with trial by jury.
Right. So in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law. Okay.
Does it say anything about your peers?
Partial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed.
Yeah, so it says nothing about peers, just an impartial jury.
Just an impartial jury.
Where do we get that trial by jury of your peers?
I hate it when you ask me questions like that. I don't remember.
I don't remember either. In my head, it was in
the Sixth Amendment.
Yeah. Well, what this does say is you get a trial by jury, and you get a trial by jury where the crime occurred, as opposed to being hauled off to Nova Scotia or taken off to England or someplace else where these guys had experience.
Yes.
So this is a jury. It's going to be a local call, and it's this principle which is one of the defining principles that sets American jurisprudence apart from a bunch of legal systems elsewhere. I mean, I know that when Americans were moving into Texas in the 1820s and 30s, one of the things that they found absolutely unsettling was that they could be arrested and hauled off deep into Mexico to await trial by 3 judges. And that was it. There wasn't any trial by jury. And so these guys are saying, well, we're being hauled a long way that's inconvenient from where we are. And then, these guys aren't impartial. They're government-appointed judges. Mm-hmm. So we're doomed.
We're doomed.
And so part of the reason that they were agitating for a separate statehood within Mexico was to establish some of these constitutional guarantees
that they grew up with.
That they grew up with, and the Mexican government said, you're no way going to be your own state because we know that that'll be just step 1. And then step 2, we'll lose total control over that region.
Yeah.
But one of the things they were agitating for was trial by jury.
Yeah, which is a really important thing. It doesn't say who makes up the jury.
Yeah.
Okay? But it has to be where the crime was committed.
Yes.
And so
they have to be impartial.
It has to be impartial. What does impartial mean?
Well, that's how come I keep getting kicked out, because they look at me and say, well, you can't be impartial. Well, why can't I be impartial? Well, I knew a guy that, took the gurney ride for capital murder.
Okay.
Back when I was in college. And they say, oh, well, we don't want you, influenced by that experience.
Exactly.
I'm a college professor, and I think about, lofty thoughts. Well, we don't want somebody overthinking stuff. So out you go.
I'm going to paraphrase my brother, who's a prosecutor, and I apologize if he watches this. I hope I got this right. But he said, as a prosecutor, he said, there's certain people he doesn't want on a jury. And one of them is college professors, because they will create their own story to fit the evidence. And he says, I don't want them to have their own story.
Yeah.
He says, I want them to have my story.
Correct.
And that's it. He says, I don't want college students, if they're traditional college students, because they haven't had life experience.
Sure.
And so he said the ideal jury in terms of a conviction would be a jury of young mothers.
Well, they rule the universe anyway.
They rule the universe, but they are deeply concerned about security and safety, so they're likely to convict. They don't mind a break from their young children, so therefore they're happy to serve, but they don't want it too long, so they want this thing done and they won't deliberate too long.
Wow.
So he says, if you give me a jury of just those young mothers, he says, I guarantee you a conviction.
Good night. Isn't that interesting? So are they an impartial jury?
Are they
They're impartial to the case,
Yeah,
but
they're impartial to the case. So what do you mean by impartial? What does that mean?
Yeah.
And, let's take it a different direction. If you're called to serve on a jury where there's going to be a death penalty,
yeah,
one of the questions they ask you is, do you support the death penalty? And if you don't support the death penalty, you're kicked off.
Sure.
You're not death qualified. That's how they call it.
yeah.
Is that an impartial jury?
I think that shows some sort of bias. Though.
Yeah, to me, it shows a bias towards the death penalty.
Sure.
And therefore, that, to me, speaks volumes about their attitudes about a bunch of things. So that's allowed, though. So what does it mean to be impartial?
Gets defined by the judge and the lawyers, doesn't
Yeah. Now, let's just take a bizarre case that I don't see happening. But supposing after the next election, President Trump, who's out of office, if he loses the next election, he's out of office, the new president, whoever it is, gets the Justice Department to indict him.
Yeah.
Okay? So there's going to be a trial. How do you have a trial before an impartial jury involving the President of the United States?
In the district where the crime occurred.
How does that happen?
Yeah.
I mean, what does impartial mean? You don't know anything about the case? If you have someone who doesn't know anything about the case, I'm sorry. We're talking about the President of the United States. It's been
They're
the number
gonna
one
know
thing. If they don't know anything, they're either lying or they're stupid.
Yeah, we'd have to try him in Australia.
But
In the outback.
but that violates the Constitution.
Yeah,
where
'cause it's not in the-
it's not in the state and the district.
Yeah. So what about change of venues? How do you get those to happen?
Okay, change of venues is where you make a plea, and it would come from the defense first, but the prosecution could also do it, of course, where there's so much publicity that they don't think they could have an impartial jury. And, there's always cases here in Abilene. We've had cases in the past where there's so much attention about one thing that everybody seems to have an opinion on it. So you want to move the case out of there, and you move it someplace else in the state where they are unlikely to.
Down the road.
Down the road.
There's a movie about a guy from Abilene. The name of the movie is Burning.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And he committed the crime in Carthage, I think.
Yeah.
And then they tried him in San Augustine, I think.
Right.
But, yeah.
Yeah, they had to get him out of there because the woman that was killed was a well-known citizen.
Yeah, she was one of the pillars of the community.
Yeah. So this is just part of how it goes.
Oh, okay. But that's not a constitutional guarantee.
No, not at all.
So that's something that's been added later.
Right, but you do get a jury, and it's supposed to be impartial, however you define impartial. And generally, we take it to mean, if possible, they know nothing about the case, or they've had no experience in a similar kind of case. And if that's too difficult, then do they know anything just about this particular case? Mm-hmm. And I remember the O.J. Simpson case. I keep going back to that.
Wow, it made a big impact.
Yeah, but when they went and did the civil trial, there was one woman who was part of the jury panel. She hadn't heard nothing about the first trial, the murder trial.
Wow.
And it's like, how do you miss it? And she says, I was a college student doing my homework. Good for her.
Yeah.
But
all right, so that's our line. And
that's our line.
That was the second part.
Second part of the Sixth Amendment.
Second part of 6 of the Sixth Amendment. All right, we'll do part 3 next time.